My name is Peter Barratt. I am a member of the Medical Association of Atlanta. I was a practicing OBGYN physician in Atlanta for almost 4 decades. I am currently retired from that practice. That's been over a year now. And today's webinar is titled Finding a Sense of Accomplishment After Retirement. And I think a very important topic. It's going to be geared toward physicians that have retired or in the process of retiring or considering approaching retirement, and basically how to create a thriving third act in their lives. I am joined today by a good friend of mine, Jack Calhoun of Encore Career Lab. And thank you for joining us today, Jack.
Sure, absolutely.
And so let's begin. And why don't you introduce yourself and also your work at Encore Career Lab?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. And I'm really grateful to be invited to this and to speak to this great group, this association. Yeah, I spent pretty much all my adult, my career in the wealth management business. I was an investment advisor, the managing principal of a registered investment advisory firm, and I was the majority owner of that firm. Um, and I did that, for about 25 years. And I liked it. It was good work. We did good work for clients. And a lot of my clients were my friends, and it was a good way to, make a living and have a career. But when I was about 50, we were approached to sell the company to a larger group out of the Midwest that was a kind of a competitor firm, kind of a sister firm in a way. But anyway, and I had not thought about it. I was still fairly young in my career at 50. But I'm also kind of a creative ADD type, never met an idea I don't like. And so, I thought, well, you know what, I've done this for so long and it'll be fun. I'll reinvent myself. I'll go do something different. And so I sold the company. And it really surprised me how much it blindsided me. I really was unprepared for kind of the existential aspects of leaving your career behind, the who am I without my career part. And I went through a period of years where I was sort of dabbling and, not really fully committed to any particular thing. The biggest challenge that I found was that, when you can do anything, how do you decide what anything is, right? And so, I call it now the wondering and wandering phase. And one of the things I've learned is that it's not unique to me. It's very typical for people that leave their careers behind. So after going through that period and being kind of reflective about it, I realized that everybody that's been invested in their careers, certainly physicians are intensely invested in their careers. Um, is sort of unprepared for leaving that identity behind, and that we sort of are thrown into this time of life without really any kind of game plan, the way that people coming out of college are. And so I also realized, I could kind of reverse engineer my own experience and come up with a program that I wish that I had had when I left my career behind. And so that was really what inspired me to start Encore Career Lab. It's been great. I feel like it sort of picks up where traditional retirement planning leaves off, which is something I did a lot of, in my prior career. Um, and I'm seeing a lot of great energy from people, a lot of great outcomes from people, and it's really been exciting to kind of move into this space, kind of new and different space.
I heard Jack's presentation a number of months ago, and we got to talking afterwards, and I was intrigued by this idea that he'd come up with. Very interested, and I thought, I wasn't one of these people that was struggling with retirement. I was still thinking and discerning and experimenting with things, but I was okay. But I thought, gee, I probably, if there's a chance to learn something about myself, or there's something to learn about this situation I was in that could improve my future, And I was all into that. So I jumped into the course, and I found it extremely satisfying. When you retire, you slow down, and I found it's that I was looking at things in a different way. I was experiencing things in a different way, probably because I had more time to digest.
Sure.
And so and the first part of Jack's course is this discernment phase where I was really finding out who I am, what I was made out of, why I am the way I am, and how did I get to where I was. All kind of interesting questions that in the busy years of practice, I don't think most of us sit around and think about that very often. I was happy with what I was doing. I was working my tail off, and it was all good. Most of it was good, but
Right.
yeah. And so, anyways, but I told Jack, I said, Jack, after I think I'm probably like a lot of physicians that have had a long, good career. We've worked hard, like a lot of people have and do. But I didn't want to work hard anymore, but I wanted to continue doing something that had value, that I feel like I was helping people. And I also wanted to have fun with whatever I did.
Yeah.
Um, so to that point, Jack, can you discuss why it's important to keep this sense of accomplishment and purpose in our lives as we move forward and leave behind this first career?
Yeah, I mean the reality is that we're the only species on Earth that's wired for a need to feel accomplished,
Hmm.
right? It goes to our self-worth and our sense of feeling like we matter. Our dogs don't wake up every day striving to be the best dogs they can be, right? They're just dogs. I know mine sure doesn't, but people do, and particularly people who are heavily invested in their careers, very capable, talented people, we get very invested in what we do. And the traditional American model that's evolved in the last century is that we work for a period of our life and then we, retire and recreate for a period of our life. And that accomplishment sort of goes out the window. Maybe we do some volunteering, but certainly not at the scale of what we did in our career. And it's very detrimental to our mental well-being in any aspect. Once we sort of lose that reason to get out of bed in the morning, and we're only accountable to ourselves, then that's where we sort of lose those guardrails, that kept us, productive and focused and feeling good about ourselves, for most of our adult lives. Um, and so I think that that's the part that gets missed in this concept of retirement as the life of endless leisure. It's a concept that really came out of the Great Depression when Social Security was enacted. We can get into that, but it's really time to revisit this concept because people are living so long and are so much healthier today than they were, even just 50 years ago. So that's why I think it's so important. We've got to keep the sense of self-esteem that people need us, that we're valued. We know we have a lot to offer, you know, even if it may be outside of the conventional, sort of identity we developed in our careers. So it's really important to figure out what that is. And that's really what my program's sort of devoted to.
You and I also went over and talked about the concept of enmeshment,
Mhm.
which is a term that psychologists use, and it describes the fusing of your career with your own identity. I think physicians are very guilty of this. We're wrapped up in who we are and how we got there for lots of reasons. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Why this presents such a challenge to a group such as this?
Yeah, absolutely. It blindsided me. I think for physicians, there's a lot in your DNA that sort of compels you to that career, that livelihood, right? I mean, a lot of people are just really kind of talented, born with that, and then work really hard. In my case, I kind of backed into the investment advisory world in my 20s and then enjoyed it and stuck with it. I didn't wake up when I was a kid at 8 years old thinking I really want to be a registered investment advisor when I grow up. But nonetheless, so I didn't think that I had a lot of my identity wrapped up in what I did. I didn't think too much about it. But when I left that behind, it really jarred me. And I distinctly remember being on a fishing trip with some friends down in Florida, and we had a lodge that we were staying at, and we were sitting on the lodge after a day of fishing. I was about 52, maybe. And all my friends were very high level, attorneys, and some physicians, real estate, and everybody's talking shop, and everybody's very high level. And I had nothing to add to the conversation. It was the first time I remember feeling that, and it was very disorienting to me. I sort of had this out of body experience, or this "who am I" experience, and that's really what enmeshment is, and it's really especially problematic for people like physicians, like pilots, people in the military, people who for whom what they do really becomes very closely aligned with who they are, at least in their mind. Nobody goes into it with that intention. It happens, and part of it's cultural, right? I mean, if someone asks you what you did, you didn't say, I help people have babies, or I practice obstetrics and gynecology. You said I was an OBGYN, right? If people ask me what I did, I didn't say I advise people on their investments. I said I'm an investment advisor, and it's literally we say what we do is who we are. And then when we stop doing that, people say, "What do you do?" And we say, "I'm retired." As I like to say, that's what we do to battleships, right? People are never meant to be retired as a statement of what you do, because that's not doing anything. That's just a statement of existence. And so I think it's something more than anything else people have to do. Phone over. Hang on one second. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I think people need to be prepared for this concept of enmeshment, and that it's disorienting, and it's something a lot of people don't see coming until they're living it, and then there's this sense of, oh Lord, what do I do now? Who am I without my career?
Yeah, I'm a planner. I've been that way my whole life, and as I moved toward retirement, I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of talking to folks, and and of course, this is a lot of physicians that I've talked to. I would look at them and say, "So what's retirement look like for you?" And I'd get this blank stare,
Yeah.
and some would just be honest and say, "I have no idea." And I
Yep.
thought, well, that's not good. um,
Right.
a lot of people moving into these traditional retirement years find that they're driven by a different set of goals, more intrinsic goals, like meaning and purpose, and what's now, for
Yeah.
my life, and we let go of those extrinsic goals, which drove us through our careers to
Yeah.
possessions and titles and status and making money, and the deal.
Yep.
Um, so what would you say to that? How can people set and achieve goals that are really better suited toward this intrinsic goal?
Yeah, I think that that's something that sneaks up on a lot of us. For most of our adult lives, our 20s, 30s, 40s, we're very invested in ego-based goals, right? I don't mean that
Mhm.
necessarily in a negative way. It's just what drives us, and we want to attain a certain level in our career, or we want to provide a certain level of income for ourselves and our family. We want to get the house in the school district, or whatever it is, and they're all very tangible, and they're all very quantifiable. It's the proverbial SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, I think, and time bound. And so we can check those things off, right? And we know we've succeeded. And so when we set goals in that time of our life, they tend to be very specific, that we know we can achieve. Well, over time, as we move into, excuse me, our 50s, and certainly beyond that, things, as you referenced, intrinsic goals like connection and fulfillment, and sort of life satisfaction values start to become preeminent for us. A lot of us get to a point where we kind of have the stuff. We have the house we want, we have the stuff we want, and our kids, if we have them, have grown and flown. Um, and then we're looking at these next decades of our life, and all of a sudden, a title or status or a particular house doesn't really hold the same appeal for us, as a driver. But we still need goals and we still need ambitions. And so it does become a challenge because things like, fulfillment and connection and joy are, as you said, intangible, right? You don't cross joy off a to-do list, right? And say, well, now I'm joyful, and that's that. It's an emotional end state. And so what I find and what I think is really important is that we figure out the kind of work as we define work that gives us those, emotional end states, that makes us feel fulfilled and valued, and that we're connected with people, and that we're doing things that matter and that are moving the needle in people's lives. And so that's important to figure out how to set goals in sort of a different way, because they're just not going to be things that you cross off a to-do list. And a lot of it really has to do with, matching it up with the values that we have at this phase of life that typically evolve differently from when we're younger.
I've done a lot of reading about happiness, which is important throughout our lives, but it kind of boils down to one sentence: meaningful human interaction,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like a lot of what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
Another thing that people talk about, and you talk to folks about moving into retirement, they go, "Oh, I'll fill my time with volunteering."
yeah,
And can you speak to that as a strategy for this time of life when you're, looking for meaning and purpose? And
sure. Yeah, that's probably the thing I hear the most, and probably the thing I thought the most for myself when I left my career behind, is I'll really get more involved now with the things that are passionate to me. And Peter, you and I are very involved in a community center in Atlanta, the Agape Community Center on the west side of town, that's just does fantastic work. And we've both invested a lot of our own time there in different ways over the years. But what I think happens is we make a false equivalency between career work and volunteer work. And they have very different sort of meanings to us as people. And, volunteering is about sort of sacrificial giving, right? We are not in it for ourselves. We're not in it for our status. We're not in it for a sense of accomplishment. We might be recognized for doing good work, but even if we are, we're a little self-conscious and almost embarrassed about it because we didn't go into it for that purpose, right? It's about giving to others who are less, fortunate, have less advantages than us, and just sort of being grateful. But our work is what gives us a sense of self-worth. It's the way that we sort of quantify that by the way that we're compensated in a lot of cases, or just a sense that we are important to other people and that they need us. That goes back to that kind of sense of accomplishment. And we don't go into volunteering for a sense of accomplishment. And so I like to use the analogy of because what I did, the portfolio, right? We have different wedges in our portfolio: large cap, small cap. Well, you need a wedge for volunteering, and you need a wedge for doing good work. Again, as you define it, not necessarily the type of work we did, 20 years ago. But I think it's important to have that distinction and realize that, trying to stick work into volunteer is really a square peg in a round hole. It's just not going to fit emotionally for us.
so you've used that four-letter word a lot, work. Um, you know, and in our society, in our country, we all these high-level careers,
Yeah,
which physicians are one, are incredibly stressful and exhausting. And
yeah,
career burnout has been a real issue that's been said to be epidemic in our society now as folks get into their 50s and 60s. And so thinking about that, in that light, why would you say to people, well, why would you want to consider continuing to work into these traditional retirement years?
yeah. I mean, I think the distinction you made is an important one, right? When we think of work, and particularly high pressure careers, certainly like physicians, demanding careers, people are wiped out by the
Yeah.
time they get to the end of their career years. I came up, even though our company, we managed, a pretty sizable amount of assets, we still only had 10 or 15 people in my company. So we were a very small company. It's been eye-opening to me talking to people who are in corporate America, Fortune 500 companies. I mean, people are just fried. Work has become so transactional and people feel so replaceable, particularly in big corporate companies, that people don't want to hear the word work, if they're financially capable of walking away, right? And I get that. I think we have to kind of redefine what that is from an Encore perspective. And to me, the big criterion criteria are agency and autonomy. That we have the ability to determine what we're going to do and who we're going to do it for and how we're going to do it. And we feel like we are the ones that are going to decide all that, right? And that's the autonomy, right? And not many of us have full autonomy in our work years. Certainly, in the medical business with all the, consolidation and everything else that goes on with, the practice management side, less than ever, I would imagine. And so people come into this sort of retirement phase of life and they don't want anything to do with that. And I don't blame them a bit. And I don't think they really should. I think, or at least I don't think that that's what the focus and priority should be. I think what work is at this phase of life is, doing an assessment. You mentioned the discernment. I think that's a great word and reflective of what we need to do. What do I have to offer, from my life experience, from all of this accumulated wisdom and expertise that I've amassed over the course of my life. And some of that is relative to our work, but certainly not all of it. And we all have a lot of wisdom in a lot of different areas, personal and professional, and the world needs it. And so that to me is what we want to shape our work around. It's our terms. We get to choose it, and it's work that we find to be motivating and inspirational, and it's important. And it's sort of exciting to me that at this phase of life, we get to sort of define that for ourselves in this third act, because we're really the first generational cohort, I would say younger boomers, older Gen Xers, that are viewing this phase of life that way. Our parents, certainly grandparents, nobody thought about this as a time to stay, productive and keep doing good work and feeling, like people need you. That just wasn't in the lexicon back then. So, it's an exciting opportunity to me that we get to define this for ourselves.
Yeah, I love that word autonomy. When I started practicing, pretty much everybody outside of academic medicine was their own boss, did their own thing, small
Mhm.
groups, and then the consolidation started, then the buying up of practices and on to where we are today, which I don't think will not continue in that vein.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is yeah. My father-in-law is a retired physician. He's in his mid 90s now, and he worked in a lot of different places, Scotland, Canada, United States. And he said the happiest that I ever was in my practice was when I was my own boss. And
Yep.
some physicians now are never going to feel that, which is an interesting idea. Another thing I want to switch gears a little bit that people talk about and you read about retirement in this phase of life is the advice of quote unquote just follow your passion. To find that ideal place, that little niche, that encore career, what do you think about that? Is that a good idea? If not, why not?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's one of those little bon mots that people throw out, right? It sounds great, and
Hmm.
we all want to turn what we love into stuff that makes money for us, or that is our work, right? I mean, it seems like a dream come true. I think the distinction I would make is that we always want to be passionate about what we're doing,
Mhm.
but following your bliss, making work out of your hobbies and sort of obsessive interests, perhaps. It's not a hard no to me. It's just something that you have to go in and do a lot of thinking about. I had a foray into a consumer product that I mentioned to you. I'm a big fan of outdoor smoking and grilling and, big green egg and all that kind of stuff. And, um, there was an opportunity in the market for a Wi-Fi and an internet connected thermometer. Everything was Bluetooth back then. And this was like 10 years ago. And so I basically did a startup and put together a development team, and we created the thermometer. It was app enabled and it was great. And, I had an excuse to expense barbecue equipment and go to trade shows. And you know what? It ended up pretty soon. It just felt like work. And I've never cooked less in my life than I did when it was part of what I had to do for my work. And so that's, the age old lesson. You might be a fantastic chef, but maybe you don't want to run a restaurant, right? Or you have a green thumb, but maybe owning a nursery is not necessarily the same thing. So, I think the distinction about being passionate about it is what's important, right? And sometimes we find the work and the passion comes after that. We find that sort of cause that we can get behind, and passion and purpose come from us being passionate and purposeful about what we're doing. So I think that's sort of the distinction that I would make.
It's another concept I wanted to hit on that when you talk to folks at this stage in their life, is in their 50s and probably 60s, is they'll say, Jack, I don't have enough runway left to really find this new life filled with purpose and quote unquote, I can't be useful anymore. And a lot of that comes on when this IT surge that we're all hit with at this stage of our lives. What's your advice to folks when they come up with this concern?
Yeah, I think that it's not really, I think that can be paralyzing as a thought. And I think when we've had successful careers, it sort of becomes this monolith in the background for us, right? And this huge mountain of, years and years we devoted, and it was a lot of work. And then we kind of assess it and we realize how much work it was. And then when we think about doing something different, we tend to kind of hold it up to that same standard. And I think it's really important that we give ourselves sort of the freedom and even the grace to not view what we're going to do against that same sort of career benchmark, because that's where we get stuck. And we think, well, what if I do something and it takes me down a wrong path and it's 5 or 10 years before I realize it. I think the key to that really is to give ourselves permission to just have some fun and test and dabble and go out and try things and recognize that a lot of what we do may not be what we end up doing, right? But it's just to see what's fun. So if you want to write, you publish an article or two online, you don't have to write your book. Or if you want to be a mentor, you advise 1 or 2 people and do it for, free or for a low fee and see how you like it. And, there are ways to get into this that get us moving. I think the action is so important after the discernment and reflection, to get going, because, the analysis paralysis is real. And, we get in our heads and we try to think our way out of being stuck. And you can't think your way out of being stuck. You have to act your way out of being stuck. And so I think those thoughts about, I don't have enough runway come from us assuming that what we're going to do is we got to figure all this out perfectly, this huge thing, before we get started. And I think it's just the opposite.
There is a topic that you and I have talked about, and I wanted to spend a little time on it, that we both think is very, very important, and that's the mental health aspects of all this. I mean, here we are talking to a group of physicians. I'd say by and large, most physicians, by the training we go through and the gauntlet that we run and the long career and the long hours, we're all type A, triple A personalities. And, we get to a situation in life that's difficult, a situation that's new, it's a transition, and we don't ask for help. We think, no, I'm smart enough. I've always been able to work hard enough, and I can get through anything in life. And the reality is, we're not doing a very good job with this. And we're also finding that at this stage in life, there is an increased risk of dementia and depression and substance abuse and divorce, a number of things. None of them are good, right? I mean, there's a lot
Right.
of good that can happen in this stage of our lives and we can enjoy it, but we've got to be careful. And so, how does your program address this? A group of people like this group of physicians we're talking to right now that by and large have never been very good at asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pride that goes into that, not for physicians specifically, but for all of us who have, sort of invested ourselves in our career and we perceive that we were successful. We get to this phase of life and, our kids are grown and gone if we had them, and maybe we're grandparents. We were at the top of our career when we exited. And internally, we sort of feel like we're supposed to be the generation at this point in our life where we're presenting to the world that, we kind of got it figured out, right? We've arrived. And it's easy to become self-conscious when you think, well, I don't know what to do with myself now that my career is over, because the entire culture is built around, working your tail off and then going off in the sunset and playing golf and tennis and pickleball, whatever that is, and traveling and party time, right? That's the sort of mythology around it. And so when we're not feeling that, or maybe we do that for a while and then, we're kind of bored with it, we don't really want to tell people that we're lost. We feel like, at least I felt like, cry me a river, right? I mean, all my friends are still busting it in their careers. They're not going to feel sorry for me because I'm bored or don't know what to do with myself. So we tend to isolate and we go internal. And that's, I think, a lot of where the mental health aspects come in. Need, as you mentioned, that sense of community and connection. And we need to feel like, and to realize that it's not us, it's this phase of life. And, for generations, retirement was, a short-term thing. It was, you retire at 65 and you smoked and you drank and you died of a heart attack at 68. And the math was pretty easy, and now people are living in a much healthier way, and certainly physicians, right? And so we're looking at decades potentially in front of us that was just not a consideration even 50, 70 years ago. And so I think that's something that, we have to be cognizant of and realize that we have a lot of years left in front of us, and the culture's really not caught up with that aspect of it. And then we need to have support and community when we're going into this phase. You mentioned some of the data, and it's, I did some research for this. I've just gotten really invested in this sort of topic of retirement, the conventional retirement. And the depression rate for men, the suicide rate for men is the highest at age 75 and up. That came from the CDC. It's double the rate of teenage suicide, and I'm sure some of that has to do with terminal illnesses or whatever, but still, that's a jarring thing to me. And I've got data to back all this up if anybody would like to reach out to me, but, depression has been found to increase by 40% when you leave your career behind. And the thing that really jumped out at me, you mentioned about dementia. There was a French study, I think about 10 years ago, that was presented at the International Alzheimer's Conference. I hesitate to say things like this to a group of doctors, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And it found that for every year you continue to work, again, work as we define it, after age 60, there's a 3.2% decrease in the likelihood of dementia per year, such that, if you work to your 65 as opposed to 60, then you have a 15% lower risk of dementia. And that, if you work into your 70s or 80s, that keeps on going. And we kind of see that, don't we? I mean, one of my best friend's fathers was a very well-known pediatrician who worked at Children's, and he was thriving into his late 80s because they were still calling him in to consult on difficult cases, and that's just one example. But anytime we see people thriving in their 80s and 90s, it's because they're still doing things that are passionate and motivational to them, and their work feels like it's their life's work, not just I got to get out of bed, and go make a buck work. And I think that's, as we're understanding, really central to at least improving our odds with dementia and depression.
I'm going to put a little plug in here. The Medical Association of Atlanta does offer mental health counseling. Oftentimes, as I said, doctors as a group are, due to embarrassment or shame or things that shouldn't be there but are afraid to reach out, in let's say depression or whatever, and mental health crisis type things. And there is counseling offered free of charge through the Medical Association of Atlanta. So that's a place. One phone call can lead you down a path that can really change your life in a positive way. I wanted to you hit on the word community, and which I think throughout your life, people that are solo actors and perform in silos and don't look for collaboration in life, and they do poorly. Sooner or later, you crash and burn.
Yeah.
One of the aspects of this group, this Encore Career Lab that you've put together, is the cohort group.
Yeah.
I've been involved in that, a group of 4 or 5 of us that get together. We're all sort of at different stages in the retirement transition. We all have a little bit different story, yet the underlying current is very similar for all of us. We're searching and we're trying to figure out, where the next step might be. And I've found it fun. I've found it's a support group. It's an educational group. Um, Talk more about that, if you would, what your vision was for that.
Yeah, I think what I realized as I started having conversations with people about this subject matter a couple of years ago, as I was sort of, forming the idea for this in my head, is that we all think it's us individually when we get stuck, right? Post career. We think there's something wrong with us or that we're not doing it right, or so we get self-conscious, right? We talked about that a minute ago. We kind of go internal, we isolate. And the more we do that, the more, we sort of get stuck in these thought loops. Why can't I figure this out? What's wrong with me? And then we get embarrassed. Um, Being in a group cohort, I think what we realize is it's not us. It's this phase of life, right? And again, what we discussed previously, we're really the first kind of generational cohort that's trying to figure this out because we have this benefit of, presumed, decades after our career's over, that are available to us, and so, people just didn't think that way half a century ago. So it takes planning, but it also takes a sense that, we're all in it together to an extent, right? I think it's particularly true for people that were heavily invested in their careers, and who come out of that and, have this sort of existential wandering experience where they don't really know who they are without what they did, to realize that this is what everybody goes through. And so there's a lot that comes out of the group cohort, the group setting. There's the support for sure, just friendships in general kind of develop. But, there's also this cross-pollination of ideas. You just never know who knows who or what ideas come out of it. Certainly beyond anything I bring to the group a lot of times. That's what's so gratifying to me, is just to see the energy kind of develop on its own and the support and the friendships that come out of that. I think it's really important. And one of the things that we most underestimate about what we get from work, from our careers, is that sense of community. And, I took that for granted. I still, my firm was in town in Atlanta. I'm still here. I still see the people I, worked with and who worked for me, I care about. But, I don't see them every day. They've got work to do. So, I underestimated just the small, what I call the micro interactions, just the how was your weekends and the sort of water cooler talk and, just a human connection when we're all alone, in our heads. That's the stuff that we realize that a lot of us take for granted. And so I think you get that back quite a bit when you're in these sort of group support, settings, whether it's in my program or some other one.
Well, Jack, this has been incredibly helpful. I hope that the MAA members will find this also valuable, helpful. We will include Jack's contact information at Encore Career Lab in the show notes. So please be sure to check those out and share with your network, share with anyone you think might be interested or this could be of value to. And of course, we'd like to thank the audience for tuning in. Thank you again, Jack, for
Absolutely.
sharing your time and your expertise. And as a reminder, please stay tuned for future MAA webinars. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Great to see you, Peter.
Great to see you.